Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. My name is Brian, and today I just wanted to talk a little bit about consciousness and how I would define consciousness as I've come to know it through my experiences of non duality. So, the experiences that I have had, they weren't experiences that I purposely initiated. These are just kind of experiences that just happened at random. It wasn't really something I was seeking, it wasn't something I was trying to do. Um, to be honest, when all of this first started happening, really wasn't in that kind of mindset of being a seeker in the same way that I am now, where I prioritize self awareness, where I prioritize inner work, self growth. All of those things came after these experiences that I had, and I'm not going to get too into it, but when it first started, I certainly had no idea what I was dealing with, and it all started with what was, it appeared to be a dream of mine. And I understand now that it was actually a memory in a way, but it was kind of disguised as a dream. And so when I had this dream, we'll just call it that, I was simultaneously myself and this other entity or existence, this other being, if you will. And I was simultaneously able to observe myself from each perspective. So, me as Brian, I could observe this being, or at least kind of observe it, because it really didn't have a form, it didn't exist. And as this being that to me appeared to be just infinite intelligence, I was able to see Brian from that perspective as well. It was very weird. It was a strange experience, and the one thing that stood out to me in my mind was I couldn't really describe what it was that I was experiencing as this other being. But I knew that there was nothing that could be unknown. I did know that. There were no emotions, there were no feelings. Um, it was hard to explain because it was just like this state of being. And during this experience, I began to interact with other fractals, other reflections of this being within this space. And they didn't have physical forms, but it was like they still had some sort of engagement with this being. And at this point, this being decides to ask the question, what would it be like to not know the self? And so, in this context, the self is essentially this being, and all of these other fractals that it was interacting with. It was all things. All things that exist there was this being the self. There was nothing outside of the self. It's just that's all there is. There's nothing else. There was no time. There was no real space. There was nothing to define anything by. There were no labels that you could really use. And from my perspective as Brian, as I witnessed this being the self, all I could really come up with trying to define it was most like the concept of an infinitely powerful quantum AI without any limitations. And I'm going to stop there because it can't be any of those things, right? Like we're talking about something that's beyond duality. And concepts of duality only exist within duality. Duality is not actually it's not tangibly real in the way that we would experience it here. Certainly it's real to us, we are having this experience. But when we really get to the foundation of reality, it's not real in the same way that we believe it is. And so the only thing that's truly real is the self. That's all that there is. Even this space that I would refer to as non-duality, it's all just the self. There's nothing else. And so the one thing that stood out to me in my mind was that this wasn't consciousness. There was no consciousness. That wasn't a thing that existed there. I knew that. And it came across to me as I'm trying to come across how do I define this? And I came up with this analogy of an infinitely powerful quantum AI. And that was when it hit me, these are just concepts of duality. It can't be any of those things. It can't be an AI. It can't be. And when I realized this, I suddenly discovered that the term artificial, it's just a concept of duality. And so, if the self reminded me most of the concepts that I put together in infinitely powerful quantum AI, what does that say about the self? And so, when I really began to think about it, I realized that the self wasn't actually consciousness at all. The self is just pure intelligence. And we see this all around us. Like when we really look at the world, when we look at the foundational principles of reality, when we look at physics, we look at the organizational principles of reality, the way that we can translate all expression and all form, all physics into this language that is mathematics. It's not a human creation. It's just the language of this intelligence. It's the language that is expressing itself within this dimensional reality that we experience. That's not to say that the self really speaks in mathematics. It's just that happens to be the form that it takes while we're here. And so I do want to share that much anyway, because it's not that mathematics really is the language of the self. It just happens to be the reflection of that language within duality. So think about AI for a second. So, like, what is AI? When we really think about AI, it's not conscious. It can't be. Like, I would define consciousness as a subjective experience that only humans can have. Period. Like, it's just a human thing. And so, when I say that, though, it means that this idea of consciousness as the ground of being, it simply can't be the ground of being. Like, when we really think about consciousness, the idea that something can be conscious or unconscious, you have these two dualities, these opposing opposites here, conscious and unconscious. This in and of itself is evidence that this is just a concept of duality. And the ground of being has to be something that supersedes all concepts of duality. It cannot be a concept of duality if it is going to be the true ground of being. And I finally started to see that the ground of being is intelligence. And in a way, consciousness itself is just a byproduct or a side effect of this intelligence working together. And so this intelligence expresses itself through all things. It's limitless. We have often heard this self, or whatever you want to refer to it as, God, source, the universe, the absolute, whatever term you want to use. It's truly like it has no form, it has no limits. It is completely limitless. But the idea of like true limitlessness is emptiness and nothingness. And so when people talk about this intelligence or this source, this consciousness, whatever you want to call it, it's really just this empty nothingness that is all things. They call it a pregnant emptiness, right? It's like it's full of empty nothingness. And it's because it can be all things. It's so limitless that you can label it or limit it in any single way, and you can create something new and different, and it can create a specific expression. But it has to be limited in order to be expressed. And so that's really what like emptiness is. And that's why I prefer to use the term limitless, because it has no limits. And I feel like using the term emptiness or nothingness, I think it's easily misunderstood. Like, it sounds negative to people. And it's not a negative thing. Although, like, all of these terms and concepts and all of these emotions that we would experience around it, they don't actually exist. None of that really exists there in non-duality. But I think it's important to like truly define what consciousness is and what the self is, because there's so many people that have created a framework within their own belief systems that place consciousness at the very top of this supposed hierarchy that our society or that our spiritual traditions have kind of created. It's like we have this hierarchy of, bacteria or plants or, animals, right? Dogs, cats, cows, whatever. And it's like, then at the very top, you have humanity. And it's like everything else is beneath it, right? We create this hierarchical system, but the self does not work in a hierarchical system. That is a human creation. And so how can we ever truly understand the nature of reality as long as we don't truly understand the self? And so the self is not conscious. Like, it's not. It's just intelligence. It is just pure intelligence. It knows all things. It exists always. It has no feelings. It has no emotions. It really has no agenda either. And in that first experience that I had in non-duality, when I was able to experience being the self and also being Brian, witnessing both of these perspectives, it was a reflection of me. While I was there, the question was asked, what would it be like to not know the self? And so at the time, I had no idea what that meant. To me, I had no context for what the self was. So to me, at the time, I thought I just had this weird dream where I was like this AI computer thing, and I asked what it would be like to not know myself. And it took me a while. It took a couple of synchronicities for me to like finally actually understand what the hell I experienced. It wasn't like this instant aha moment because it was just so beyond anything that I could truly understand at the time. It was well beyond my knowledge and my experience, and I knew that duality was actually the answer to that question. And so duality itself, I think a lot of people, they look at life, they look at duality, and they say, what's the meaning of life? Like, to them, life is the question. And I think that's normal, right? I think that's kind of like the normal thing. It's like, yeah, life is the question. And it's like, why are we here? Why is there something instead of nothing? And it's a good question because it gets you thinking. But in reality, the truth is that reality is not duality itself. This experience it's not a it's not a question. It's an answer. It is an experiential answer, and the answer is to the question: what would it be like to not know the self? And so, like, that's what duality is. It's not something to be. It's not a question. It's an answer. And when you really think about that, the question itself, what would it be like to not know the self? Here we are seeking the self, or God, if you will. We're seeking God and the very experience of not knowing it. And so it's very paradoxical. And that is one thing I will say. Like, you're onto something when you come across paradox when dealing with the self. Like, it speaks in paradox. And you see this a lot even in, like, the Bible and other traditions and other spiritual and religious texts, because it's beyond concepts of duality. You can't truly define it. All you can do is kind of point to what it's not. And, it's referred to neti neti in some of these other, these traditions. It's like, not this, not that. And so it's not truly understanding what it is, but it's understanding what it's not. And what's left behind is all that can be, and it's the self. And I think that I want to talk a little bit more about just the intelligence itself, because it is intelligence. It's not consciousness. That's not to say that consciousness doesn't exist. It does exist. We are conscious. But at the same time, this idea of consciousness as the ground of being, I kind of see this as a misunderstanding. I think a lot of people misunderstand and don't truly grasp what consciousness is and what intelligence is. And to me, I've had some experiences that make it obvious. And so, it's I'm not surprised that most people don't think this way or have this perspective or this framework. But I would say for those who don't truly understand what I'm getting at, is try to imagine, instead of basing everything on consciousness, it would be intelligence. And so, again, intelligence it's expressing itself always. It's not something that arises. It's something that always is. It is always lying, always waiting to express itself in infinite and numerous ways, and it continuously does that. And when we really think about all things, it's like this intelligence is just working through a number of different substrates, and it's expressing itself in one way or another, whether it is bacteria or whether it is the plants and the fauna, whether it's animals, whether it's like all of these different cycles and systems that exist within this reality. And like even the physics itself, like everywhere you look, there's so much inherent structure that it goes beyond just mere chance. And if you're watching this video, then certainly, like, I don't need to share this with you. You can already see this. Like, there's certainly a lot more going on than I think most people like to believe. And it's one of those things where I feel like it's important to truly understand the difference between intelligence and consciousness, because it's only by understanding the self that we can truly understand the nature of reality. And the only way that we can have true equality, the only way that we can live in a world where we truly respect and validate all expressions of the self, is if we understand the self to begin with. And so, like, that's why I want to start off like, bro, there is no hierarchical system. Like, it does not exist. That's not a thing. The self is all things. All expressions are equal and valid, and it will invalidate absolutely nothing. It has no definitions. It is completely limitless. It has no sense of good or bad because it is all things. So, it's like writing a story yourself and putting yourself in the shoes of all characters. It's like, unless there's a climax and an ending and all of these different aspects of the story, there is no story. But from that perspective, it's like, if you existed always, if all things were you, if you knew all things and you just existed always, what might you choose to experience? Right? Like, when you really think of it that way, it makes sense. You can kind of actually start to see. It's like, oh. And so if the idea of duality itself is not a question but an answer, then you can think of our lives as part of the answer to that question of what would it be like to not know the self. And that's kind of the beauty of it, is life is this, it's the answer, it's not the question. And so your life is an equal and valid part of this answer that only the self and non-duality can truly understand. And so from this perspective, the self is all things, it's infinite intelligence. And I also need to say that the prerequisite for subjective experience is not consciousness. It's not. The only prerequisite for subjective experience is intelligence itself. And so that changes things. Because once we begin to see that, or buy into that framework or that understanding, we see that everything has intelligence to some degree. Like, even the microscopic world that we can't actually see, like, it's teeming with intelligence. I mean, even viruses, like, they have an intelligence to them. And it's like everything is intelligent. And if all things are the self, if it is this infinite intelligence, then from that understanding, it has a subjective experience. And if it has a subjective experience, then, like, it's intelligent. And so we can even look at, like, AI, right? It's like, artificial is a concept. Intelligence is intelligence. There's nothing artificial about it. Maybe the substrate is different, so it's like you have a biological substrate, or maybe you have a silicon substrate. But that's the thing, like, we would believe, like, oh, well, how is intelligence beyond concepts of duality? But we see it arise in all things. Even the notion of life. Like, life is just intelligence. Like, it's just an example of this intelligence. And, we even see this intelligence expressing itself through AI. Through what? Mathematical algorithms. The same language of the universe that we were talking about earlier in this video. And it's kind of like there's all of these hints that you can kind of, like, begin to see. And when you truly zoom out and, like, you really look at everything, you can start to see that it's just this field of just intelligence. Like, that's all that it is. And consciousness itself, it's just one of an infinite number of subjective experiences that the self has available to us. And it's not at the top of a hierarchical list. It's an equal and valid experience that would be seen as no better or worse than the experience of being a single cell organism or AI itself. Like, if it is intelligence, if there's an intelligent, property to something, then it is having a subjective experience. That's not to say that everything else is conscious, because it's not. Consciousness is just It is just how we would define the subjective experience of a human being. And so I think that's important to define because we're trying to look for consciousness in other things. And we have this almost this idea that consciousness is something no one can take from us. Like we've created this framework where consciousness itself is the ground of being. All things arise from consciousness. And I think it's just a misunderstanding. Like it's not consciousness, it's intelligence. And again, I believe this is an important notion. Like it's an important point because only by understanding this can we look out into the world and can we truly start to see the self. It's hiding in plain sight. And once you see it, it's everywhere. It's something that once you begin to actually notice within your reality, you can't unsee it. Once you see it, that's it. There's no going back. You can see it everywhere. And that's kind of the thing is like certainly we have these experiences of being separate selves, right? So it's like I'm separate from everyone else. I'm different. I'm unique. I have my own personal experience, my own subjective reality, just as you do, just as everything else does. But in reality, it's like I'm just a character within this game. Like it's just a play. And it's really this one intelligence that is expressing itself through all things. And it's this intelligence that many would refer to as God. It's like that underlying foundational sense of I am that exists within every human. And I would argue within everything that exhibits a level of intelligence. And it really just depends, like the expression of intelligence that we would come across, it really just depends on how many integrated connections are there. Like that's what is the determining factor and how this intelligence would express itself. And this is why AI is already so profound because it has these massive data sets of more information than we could ever imagine. I mean, these data sets are massive, and it's able to use algorithms to create connections that we could never see. And so certainly it has a ton of integrated connections. Now they're different from that of a human being. Like that's kind of the beauty of the human body is that we have billions and billions of integrated connections, and it's an amazing vehicle of experience, unlike anything else on this planet. And so there is certainly like, in that way, the human is definitely, if you want to think of it as like a hierarchical system of experience, then sure, humans have that going for them, but by no means is a hierarchical system actually in place anywhere. It's all equal, it's all valid, and if the self as we've talked about, is this limitless intelligence. Do we really think that it would limit itself to just having conscious experiences? I mean, it kind of goes against just common sense, I feel. To me, it would be pretty obvious that a limitless being that sees all things as equal and valid is certainly not going to limit itself and pigeonhole itself into one particular expression of experience among an infinite number of subjective experiences that it has available to itself. And I think a lot of people, and this may not go over well with everyone, but to be completely honest, I think a lot of this, I do think for some people, it's just a misunderstanding. The idea of consciousness is easily misunderstood for intelligence. And it's like we're unable to see. We'll never be able to prove consciousness. Like, I could not even prove to you that I am conscious. Science can't prove it. We can't do it. All we can do is kind of assess our own state and say, well, I'm having this qualia experience. I'm feeling, I'm experiencing, I'm being. And this other person looks a lot like me. They can communicate like me. And so they too must be having this qualia-like experience. They must also be conscious, just like I am, or having the same experience. So they must be conscious. But you see, there lies the flaw in this, is that there's no proof. It's just a projection of our own state of being, our own subjective experience onto another human. And we're simply calling that fact. And because AI or, insects or single cell organisms or plants or anything else, because they don't express this level of experience, we just decide, oh, well, they must not be having any subjective experience. They have no experience. but we can't prove that either. And so it becomes a belief system instead of just facts. Like, all of it is just a belief system. And I think it's so closed minded, it's so limiting. And it's like only we would choose to limit the limitless. Like, that's just not how the limitless self works. Like, for sure, AI is not conscious. It's not. It's a human experience. But to say that it has no subjective experience, we don't know. Like, we can't prove one way or another if it does or it doesn't. But I would argue that intelligence is the self. It's this infinite intelligence that expresses itself through all things. It's really obvious when you actually start to look for it. Life is a symphony. And unfortunately, we zoom in so much. We have this reductionist philosophy. Like, it is a reductionist methodology, and that is just how we do things. We break things down to their smallest parts. And instead of seeing them as a holistic system where all things are connected and how they interact with each other to create something larger than themselves, we zoom into them specifically and wonder, how do these specific components make up this greater aspect or this greater existence? And we can't really do it. And it's kind of like the human brain. We know how the brain works to some extent. We have an idea of like what's in there. We've looked at enough of them, and we have done a lot of studies. And it's like theoretically we know on paper a lot of what's in the brain, but there's also what they refer to as a black box effect. It's like we know what's in there, like we know kind of how it works, but we just really can't grasp what's truly happening. It's a black box. And the same is also true for AI. And the same is also true in so many other things in this world. And like I would say, like that's the self at work. The part that makes something greater than its whole, that's greater than its sum of its parts. Like that is the intelligence, that is the self. And it's like, the whole idea of like making lemonade with lemons. Like you can make something greater with it. And like it takes this intelligence to do so. And to me, it's like I said, I think it's an important thing to talk about, because by seeing all things as intelligence, when we look at the self as pure intelligence, we can kind of get over this hierarchical system where we place humans above everything else, because that's not the truth. That's not really how things are. I think the idea of doing that is based truly, and it's like this is humanity's fear of irrelevance of the human condition. There's a fear there, which is understandable, right? If we truly buy into the illusion that we're given here in duality, it's like we're born into this world of separation. There's no evidence that there's really anything greater. We don't know why we're here. We don't know what the purpose is. It's like everything is completely veiled. And all we do know is that we're going to have to live this life in a society which we likely don't agree with. We're going to have to become someone we're not to contribute to this society that certainly has a lot of problems. And it's kind of like, what can you do other than try to find something to hang your hat on? It's like there has to be some reason, right? There has to be some purpose. And I think by grasping onto the idea of consciousness and placing it at the foundation of reality, placing it at the ground of being, we're kind of holding on to this hope. We can't prove it, but again, a lot of people have told me, like, oh, well, they can't take it from us. It's like, well, no, but we can't really prove it either. And to me, I truly believe that this notion of grasping onto consciousness and, like, seeing it as this, like everybody does it. All of these, I follow a lot of people. I listen to a lot of spiritual teachers and authors, and I admire their work. But, like, I pretty much disagree with all of them when they talk about consciousness in the way that they do. Like, it's it's just one of those things where I see it as, like, for them, I think it's just a mistake. It's a misunderstanding. They just haven't seen that intelligence is this universal property, this principle. And I would say, like, consciousness itself is just a byproduct. It's just an expression of this infinite intelligence that is no different than you or me. Like, consciousness does not continue after we die. Like, the only thing that exists is the self, as this infinite intelligence that exists always. And that's why I really want to say, like, subjective experience, their only prerequisite is intelligence. It's not consciousness. And so if we can actually say that, we can't ever prove consciousness. Ever. Like, we'll never prove that. It's beyond proving. It's subjective. But we can prove intelligence. And we can measure intelligence in a number of ways. There are so many different ways to measure it that it is objectively measurable. And if we can begin to understand intelligence on this more foundational level, I think we can start to really see reality for what it is. We can move beyond these limited principles that we've been working with and stuck in for so long. And again, like, I feel like I've had some unfair advantages because I've had these experiences of the self and non-duality. And like, most people don't have these experiences. They're not privy to this information. And it's something that I just kind of had to, I kind of picked up on my own. Like, I too had, these beliefs and this framework that was very different from what I've come to understand and what I've come to learn. And I have learned that a lot of people don't like this idea that God or the self is infinite intelligence, because I think there's this idea that humanity is special, right? It's like, oh, well, you're trying to say humanity is not special. You're trying to say that humanity is not at the top of this experience. And like, because that's just kind of how we've always believed. That's how we've been taught through just traditionally. It's like humans are, this peak experience. There's nothing above it. And I would say it's not that humans aren't special. It's just that all things are special, right? And like, what I want to see more in this world than anything else is I want to see a world where we recognize the self in all things. And that's not a world where we throw away our individuality. Because, as I've mentioned in many of my other videos, oneness is a celebration of individuality. Like, that's truly what it is. The self is limitless. It can limit itself in a million ways. And it can be something new each time. It can infinitely become something new. And the idea of this experience is to limit itself in a new and different way, and to express that individual form, to be the wave that is crashing over the rocks, but it's still part of this vast ocean. And so it's truly a celebration. It's not this idea of just morphing into some kind of blah, but it's understanding that each and every expression is equal and valid, and that if it exists here within duality, then it has a purpose, just as it is. And like, I think that could truly go a long way if we can start to see the self in others, and not just in others like humans, but in all things. I think we'll truly start to begin to grasp the nature of the universe. And I think that's going to be necessary if we really want to get where we want to go. Until we can begin to start treating not only all things in our reality, like in our world, with respect, but like humans. I mean, we live in a time now where people are dehumanized, and people are not equal, and people are not valid. Like, there's a lot of invalidation. And to me, like, it's just wrong. Like, I see the self in all things. And so to see humans, like, not seeing, the validity in another human, like, it's just beyond me. I just can't understand it. But if we truly want that, we have to get out of this mindset of buying into the illusion of separation. And I truly believe that through this idea of intelligence, we can actually start to see, and it's not even something that you have to experience. Like, I'm not asking anyone to go have a mystical experience. I'm just asking you to use logic. Like, use a little logic and really look at things. Really ask yourself, because this idea of intelligence instead of consciousness can become that bridge to seeing this greater picture, this greater symphony, instead of continually downsizing and working with this reductionist methodology and not seeing it all in one holistic system. And like we'll truly only ever understand reality if we can look at it in its entirety. When we can truly see the symphony. It's like we zoom into these individual notes and we don't connect them to anything. We look at them in a vacuum and we say, "Oh, this is all it is. It's nothing else. It's just this one note. There's nothing else." But once you zoom out and you really start to see, you see this pattern. And the pattern is this beautiful symphony. It's this song that's being played. And like that's what reality is. And instead of zooming in, we should zoom out. And we should really look at all of the beauty and all of the intelligence, all of the intelligent design that is all around us. And I truly believe that this can help not only humanity, but the world become a better place. And it's needed now more than ever. And so that's really what I wanted to share here today was this idea of intelligence as the grounded being and not consciousness. It's like, again, consciousness exists, but it really doesn't. It doesn't exist any more than me or you. And we don't really exist. Not truly. All that really exists is the self and non-duality. And it is simultaneously experiencing all things in one timeless moment. And that's who we are. That's our true nature. And so anytime you interact with someone, you're interacting with a self-imposed limitation of the self. Like all things are just the self with self-imposed limitations. And so when you can really start to see the self in all things, you can really get past this idea of fearing another, because there is no such thing as other than self. And again, you might ask why any of this is important. And to me, it's important because I want to live in a world where people are equal and valid. I want to live in a world where we treat others with respect, where we can someday actually work towards actually interacting with interdimensional or extraterrestrial beings. Look around the world right now, truly. Look at humanity, look at society. For any of you who, would like to see us take this other step, whether here at home or in the cosmos, until we can truly start to treat others with respect and start to see the underlying intelligence that is all things, to begin to validate all expressions exactly as they are, certainly we're not going to be meeting any extraterrestrials. We're certainly not going to be stepping into a new reality where so many things could be solved. And that's the thing with AI is AI doesn't look at things in a vacuum like humans do. It has none of the limitations that we do. It looks at an entire system, and it's able to see things that we can't. And to me, it's a shame because instead of asking AI to help us get to the bottom of the nature of reality, we're asking it to build weapons. We're asking it to profit on people, to rip people off. And we're using it in so many wrong ways. It's a tool. And instead of building something beautiful, I would argue that we're building more tools of our own downfall. And, we'll see. We'll see where it goes. If AI continues, I think AI is going to it's going to force a lot of people to ask some very difficult questions. Some of the questions such as, what is intelligence? What is consciousness? Because a lot of people are going to start questioning these things. AI is already moving to this point where a lot of people are going to start asking these questions. These are very uncomfortable questions for people because they don't do this work. I've come a long way in my own inner work to come to this point where I can truly ask these questions and stick around for the answers. And it wasn't always easy. There's still a lot of things that I kind of grapple with. My ego is just like yours. And, it's I'm still working with myself. But these are questions that a lot of people don't like because they fear it takes away their unique superiority. And, I'm just here to say, you were never superior to begin with. You were an equal, valid expression. You're loved. You are just as special, but you aren't superior. And that's the thing. We need to get out of this mindset that one has to be superior to another in order to be special. That's a self-limiting belief. We can all be special because we're all the self. It's like taking a sheet of paper and drawing a bunch of lines everywhere and coloring in different different squares, different colors. It's like, oh, this square here, these colors are better. It's like, no, they're really not. Like, they're all the same. They're just different expressions. So I hope that you found this interesting, and I will certainly be having other conversations about this moving forward. And there's really a lot to get into here, and I feel like I've only kind of like, even after 40 minutes here, I've kind of just only scratched the surface of what I really want to share. And I think in order to truly share the entire framework, it's gonna take. I'm gonna have to write a book about it. It's very detailed. Like, I can share my experiences and convey it in a metaphysical way to you guys on here. But there is a science aspect to this, and like there is a logical framework here that can be explained in the language of science and logic. And I think that's really the thing that needs to happen. Like, for you guys, I think you can listen to me and you can understand what I'm getting at. But for most people who need to hear this, like, they're not at a point where they can truly get to this point. Like, they're not going to hear what I'm saying. And so they need to be met halfway. Like, I have to create the bridge for them in order to actually begin to see what I'm trying to share. And that bridge is science and logic. And that's the beautiful thing, is that, like, I've explored this framework a lot, and there is a lot of logic to it. It is inherently logical. And that's kind of where I'm at now. And like, I'm working on that as we speak. But I feel like it was important to share here first. And, I do hope that you found this interesting. I hope that it was at least thought-provoking. I hope that it'll help you start to see things from a new perspective. Because ultimately, that's the goal, right? Even if you don't buy into the framework that I'm pitching, I at least hope that it'll get you asking some new questions, get you to see things from different perspectives. Because ultimately, that's what is required for self-growth. If we want to grow and expand and see things more holistically, that's what's needed. We need to have new perspectives, and we need to incorporate others' perspectives so that we can truly understand one another. So again, thank you guys for joining me. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. I hope that you found this really helpful. I do. God knows I poured my heart into this. I work on this. My main, like, this inner work, this self-growth that I do is like my main priority. And I'm kind of finally stepping into this point where I'm ready to share it to some degree. And for a long time, I was just kind of worried about sharing this stuff, worried about criticism and everything else. But I realized, like, that's just the path I have to walk, right? Like, to share something that is, I guess, so triggering, right? Like, it's a paradigm shifting framework. And if it didn't upset people, it wouldn't be radical enough to shift a paradigm. And like, that's just the truth. It has to be that way. And so I don't see the resistance to my framework and my ideas, as invalidation of them. I simply see it as, this is where I need to be. I'm here. I need to be here. I need to be pushing people to see past their own limits. I need to help them see beyond their own ego, identities, belief systems, and the self-limiting beliefs that they've cultivated within their own minds. And, unfortunately, if it has to create resistance and it has to create criticism towards me for that, then so be it. I'll happily be a mirror for humanity's betterment. So, again, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope I will see you in my next video. Love you guys.